Hey, we got there. So welcome to Kairos 555. And tonight we're going to be thinking about restoration. We're going to be thinking about Sabbath and restoring stories. So I think we will kick off with the video from Andy. So I'm going to flick through and find that. We're going to watch that, and then we'll have a story from Hannah, and then from Chalky, from Gavin, from myself, and then we'll stop the recording, and those of us that are here on the Zoom will carry on the conversation after that.
When you read your Bible, you get the impression that Sabbath is all about rest. It's all about taking time out, and there's an encouragement to seek God and to be with God in that time. So what do you do if your daily work, or your vocation, as I probably should say, is all about doing that or seeking to help others be with God? You may well find me in a supermarket on a Sunday, and you may think that's awful because, you know, keep Sunday special. It's 1994 since we stopped keeping Sunday special, and certainly there's been a good chunk of my life when having to go to the supermarket on Sunday was the only time I could do it, which is true of a lot of people. But I find myself there sometimes. I even end up going to the co-op and getting the bread and wine sometimes for communion. So it's pretty shocking, isn't it? Except, of course, when you are a minister, Sunday is not at all your Sabbath. It's one of busy days. I know some people think it's the only day we work, but reality we will get one day a week off, and for me that's a Monday. And I was trying to think what I do on a Monday that would class as Sabbath. I certainly do try and rest, although by necessity, having children, I end up getting up pretty much the same time as normal and walking the dog because he needs walking. But I do very little. In fact, I realised when I thought about it, I possibly run away from anything to do with with God. Does that seem wrong? I certainly don't tend to open my Bible on that day, because if I open a Bible I end up more often than not thinking about sermon ideas, and then that takes me on to thinking about preparing services, and before long I'm in work mode. I rarely read a book on spirituality or religious things and those sort of worthy tomes, because again it takes me back into thinking about those I'm looking after and the spiritual development of myself and other people, and again I'm in bizarrely I'm in work mode. I certainly wouldn't go anywhere near a church unless I had to, because even if it wasn't my own, well, sometimes maybe if it's not my own church, but even then again I'm in work mode. So how do I do Sabbath, and do I do it right? I say Sabbath isn't a Sunday, but it's not entirely true, because I think part of being Sabbath is being part of the family of God, and that is where I am part of the family of God with my churches and with those I look after. Obviously with Kairos that happens at other times in the week, but so part of Sunday is part of my Sabbath. But it's not that I don't seek God on my days off. What I realised is although I run away from what I would say is my usual routes to God, I seek other ways. I get away from the people that I'm looking after. Sorry about that, but it's true. I go and find space, and I go and find nature, and usually with my wife or my kids I'll go and take a walk. I'll go and sit by the sea. I'll read a secular book that has nothing to do with religion. I'll do some art. I love doing art on my day off. It just takes me away from myself. I love watching films on my day off. Again, just enter into another reality. So does that mean that I just avoid God? Well, the reality is those things for me are an alternative route to God. They are part of my spirituality. When I walk, I take my camera, and that is part of my spiritual life. when I'm out in nature and I see the wonder of creation and I see animals, and I sit listening to the trees rustle or the waves lapping on a beach, or I'm just in that spacious place, that I'm free to be me. I'm free to let the things go that I'm perhaps carrying around with me. And that's sort of a prayerful, spiritual thing. That resting, that getting away from the everyday, that letting go of burdens is important to me. But it's also being in creation is my other church, is my other altar. I used to be guilty when I missed church, and there was when I was a steward, there were certain preachers that just bored me, if I'm honest. Somebody called Norman, you can imagine. And I'd go up on Dartmoor and I'd walk. And I had a better church in many ways on that day than I did when I was in the building. So Sabbath for me is all about renewal and spirit, and it's spirit filled. It's just I use those other techniques and other vehicles for it. And I delineate between the two because that's the only way I can survive as a minister. And it doesn't mean that for you reading the Bible or reading a spiritual book wouldn't be a good thing. I just have those things I do that are spiritual in my work, and I have those things that I do on my Sabbath, and everything is God's, isn't it?
Thank you, Andy. That was great as a starter for our stories. We're going to move on now to a story from Hannah, if that's okay, Hannah. Thank you. Can we pin you?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so my story starts in 2017. I was living in Leeds at the time, and I was sort of in desperate need of restoration. And I'm the sort of person who is happy to spend some time by myself, as well as with other people at different times as well. So, and one of my favourite places in the UK is Lake Coniston in the Lake District. I'm sure lots of us have been there. And so I'd booked a lovely little cottage that I've stayed in previously, so I knew what I was going to, because that can cause some anxiety if I'm going to a new place and don't know what it's like. I knew that bed was comfortable and all that kind of stuff, and I was really looking forward to it. I'd fairly recently broken up with someone, and work was really quite difficult, I think, at the time, and I really didn't like living in Leeds. It's too big a city for me, so I was desperate to just have that rest and get out into nature. So so I set off. I can't remember the dates. It was probably a Friday to Sunday or something, I don't know. But I set off in my little car, and you know, had the music. So music is a really great way for me to unwind, singing along in the car. And I got to, I don't know the name of the road, but it wasn't that far out of Leeds, and it was up at the top of a quite a big hill, and there was a set of traffic lights, so you could either go forward to get onto a roundabout and then go wherever, or you could go left. And my sat nav was telling me to go left at the traffic lights. So I was there at the top. I was the first one in the row. There was nothing behind me, and the lights turned green. So, you know, I went to start, and my car wouldn't go anywhere. The engine was still running. It was still on, but it just wouldn't go. And I panicked a little bit. I was like, I don't know what's wrong with my car. What do I do? But thankfully, I very quickly figured out that if I just rolled backwards, there was nothing behind me, thankfully. If I rolled backwards, I could get onto the verge at the side of the road. So I did that and then rang my dad. That's always the first point of any disaster. And then I ended up ringing the AA or the RAC, and they said they would send someone out. But I was a bit, shaken because I was by myself. It's the first time that I've driven long distance in the car, and I'd broken down. And I really needed the loo. But there was a garage actually at the ring road that there was a Starbucks, I think. So I went there, fortunately, and didn't then have to wait too long for the guy to come. Anyway, by the time he did arrive and tried the car again, it started, and it moved, and it was all fine. So he was like, well, I can't fix anything if there's nothing wrong. And I was like, there is something wrong. It didn't go. I managed to convince him to come for a ride with me, and it was fine until we did sort of a loop round. So we ended up at the bottom of the hill, and it was fine until we got there and we got stuck in a queue, and then it happened. Whatever was wrong with it happened. So he was like, oh, okay, now I know what's wrong. Anyway, it was something to do with the radiator and the thermostat and all of that stuff. He fixed it, but he was like, you need to get a new such and such at some point, but I fixed it. And I was really worried that it was going to happen again. So I asked him to follow me for 10 minutes to make sure that I was okay. Anyway, I did eventually, what should have taken, I think, to a 2.5 hour journey took me nearly 6 hours. So you can imagine by the time I got there, I was ready for food and rest and nothing else happening. So I parked up, emptied my car, did several trips to take my stuff into the holiday cottage. And on the last trip, when I shut the boot, I then couldn't find my car keys. And after a little bit of search, checking the drain that was nearby, I was like, I think the keys are inside the car. And I've got such a good little car that it's so secure, you can't get in it. So I rang my dad again to say, I think I've locked my keys in the car and I don't have a spare set. What do I do? And he said, well, you have to ring the RAC again. So that was a little bit embarrassing because I'd already rung them once that day. Anyway, they said, oh, well, we can't send someone out there until the next morning. I was like, well, I've got everything inside that I need. I've got my toothbrush, so it's all good. I can wait until tomorrow. So tomorrow came and the RAC man came, and we basically had to break into my car to get the car keys out. And I ended up having to climb through the window because we couldn't get the door open from the outside. So it was quite, the start of my holiday was just this massive disaster that is now quite funny. But I was then, once that had happened and I got my car keys back, I was able to start my holiday. And for me, it was really restful because I was somewhere that I loved. Like Andy, I was surrounded by nature, and that is where I feel most at rest. I put my running shoes on and got out and about and ran by the lake and just explored, walking everywhere. I found Tarn How, which is one of my favourite places, and ended up by the water, just sort of sitting by the water for ages and kayaking and reading, listening to music. And I'm sure we've all had holidays that have gone a little bit wrong. But hopefully, because there's a lot of pressure on holidays, isn't there, to rest and recuperate before you have to go back to work. And so if something goes wrong, it can be quite difficult. But I think just being in that particular place that I was familiar with and was just surrounded by nature, that gave me the rest that I need, and able to kind of cope with the world when I went home. And fortunately, the car didn't break down again after that. So that's my story, really. It was quite eventful, but I did get the rest that I needed at the end of it.
Thank you, Hannah. If we were in person, we'd all be clapping, but we probably need to just do it silently, don't we? Just, well done. Thank you. And we're going to move on. We're going to keep moving, because we're going to talk about all the stories at the end. So, Chalky, are you all right to tell your story? Do you want to lean forward so that you can be in the light? And there you go. And I'll sit back.
All right, well, storing stories. So the thing that occurred to me when Leanne mentioned what the theme was just really the story of Martha and Mary, and that I'm sure many of you know, but so it might be a good idea just to try and refresh people's memories. So I'll do that first. So it's a story from the Bible where Jesus was with his disciples and with other followers, and they went to Martha and Mary's house for hospitality. And I think in the Middle East, hospitality is a big thing. So if somebody comes to your house, then people will make an effort to make sure that they're kind of fed and watered. I guess that's got an element of pleasure, but also of a sense of duty as well. And I think they're sisters, Martha and Mary, but they took a different approach to this hospitality. So Jesus was there talking with people, and Mary was busy kind of listening to Jesus, and Martha was getting very busy kind of doing lots of stuff. And well, I think of that is probably they're both kind of doing what they're good at as well. So I think they were kind of both being themselves to some extent. And Martha, though, kind of got hassled and then complained to Jesus that Mary wasn't helping, which I think was kind of where almost the mistake came in. And it made me think of the Garden of Eden and the tree of knowledge. So that knowledge of good and evil, which becomes such a problem. So you've got a situation where they're both kind of getting on with their own things. Martha gets hassled and then complains about Mary. And I think that seeing that she believes that to be wrong and drawing that to Jesus' attention is kind of one of the bits maybe where the story takes a turn. And Jesus actually has a very interesting response to that. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And Jesus has a really interesting response, and really kind of, unfortunately for Martha, doesn't support her in her sense of kind of indignation and frustration with her sister. But and again, I'm paraphrasing, but effectively says, Mary's, why are you so stressed? And Mary's chosen the better thing. Which really echoes for me that other element of kind of judge not lest ye be judged. And I can't, maybe old language, but don't judge other people, and you won't be judged. And that comes home to Martha then, because in judging Mary, she then actually Jesus makes almost a call against her and says, "Hold on, don't get stressed about what Mary's doing. Kind of think about yourself." It's always kind of quite a funny story, but I think it, for me, it's that sense that in the theme of restoring stories, you've got potentially both of them doing what that they could be good at, but actually Martha particularly getting frustrated with that, which might be quite interesting. But I think the thing that really twists it is this then getting upset about what's happening with Mary. So there, hopefully that's not more than 5 minutes. Some thoughts.
So thank you, and again, thank you. Brilliant. So we're going to hear now from Gav. Gav, are you ready?
Yeah, so the latter part of winter just has this kind of effect on me, but I'm not unhappy, miserable or dissatisfied. But there is something there in my inner being that feels like I'm a little bit sluggish or I'm lumbering. And seeing the sun starting to shine and the daylight is getting just a little bit longer and brighter. Now the snowdrops on other plants are coming to flower has turned the lumbering into slow cartwheels and an appreciation that change is on its way. I'm picking up the reins of my gardening work again. So I'm in Hull for a week and I've missed the coast. At the present moment, me and Fiona are in, deep, Greenbelt, we're in Oxfordshire. And I have missed, the ability to just, spend half an hour traveling and going to the coast. So I had a bit of a day off on Wednesday. I only had a small job, and it was nice to go and stretch my legs and have a decent walk. And I've been to Kilnsea many times. And after most of my adult life not visiting, it was time I went for a walk around Spain Point. It was beautiful. And soon I lost track of time. And after 3.5 hours, it was time to skip back to the car. At that time, not many people had walked as far as I did, apart from someone combing the beach, looking for their type of treasure, and an explorer with a camera nearly half a mile away from the lighthouse. We exchanged pleasantries and struck up a conversation, and upon parting, I said that it was one of my wife's favourite places to visit, and she would love to be here. The walker told me his wife passed away last year. He lives nearby, and his family had fantastic day trips when they were young. And he would never travel here, until the car was full, sometimes with neighbours or with friends, and would park up near the lighthouse and just enjoy the day. And as the family grew older and the children left home, him and his wife continued to visit and enjoy the beautiful changing landscapes with the wildlife. Since the passing, many times he intended to walk to Spain Point, but only travelled as far as the cafe in Kilnsea before returning home. A path he travelled so many times with others, he now has to walk by himself. So what a privilege it was to meet him where I did, near the lighthouse with the sun shining, with blooming common gorse smiling around us. Both of our journeys that day in much different ways, feeling around for the path of restoration.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you again. Right. So I'm going to finish this off with my story. And in order to do it, I'm just going to have to move the camera. There we go. So I'm going to tell it. There we go. In the sand. So need a few props. There was once a big desert, and in the middle of the desert was a deep well. It was so deep that people could no longer see the water that they needed to drink. But sometimes you could feel the cool dampness coming up from its depths. People can't live in the desert without water. It's hot. And it's easy to get lost. And the wind changes the landscape. so you can lose your sense of direction. There's nothing green and there's nothing there to give shade. And so people hurry across the desert because of its dangers. One day, a person went slowly across the desert. They came to the well and had a good look. There was no hurry. They looked at the little golden strands lying across the desert. They picked up a rusty object. No one could remember what it was for. It looked like a big cup that you could carry water. Where would you find any in the desert? The person looked again, kicking at the golden threads. They seemed a bit out of place. They weren't quite sure what they were. Other people thought they were silly and just went on their way. The person went back to this big cup and then went to the deep well. And they went around picking up these golden threads. Laid them together. And they lowered down into the well. And when they drew it up, they'd found refreshing water. They tasted the water. And they were changed. So they went on their way. And they left the bucket and the thread so that others passing that way could taste the water. I wonder what the water could be. I wonder what the desert could be. I wonder if you have ever crossed the desert. I wonder what the deep well could be. I wonder if you have ever come across the golden threads. I wonder why the person stopped. I wonder how to wonder. But what about this ending? When the person went on their way, they left the threads and the bucket so someone else could discover what to do. I wonder which ending you like best. And I wonder which part of the parable is for you. So, oh, now we've got. Thank you. So I need to just share the screen just to finish off. You can see that. So we've had 5 people tell 5 stories, and we're going to, in a minute, we're going to stop recording and we're going to carry on and let other people tell their stories and discuss those we've heard. But thank you again to everyone who shared tonight. And we do have another opportunity if you've been inspired. In March the 10th, we're going to be thinking about love languages. We're going to be thinking about what makes you you. I feel like
We
changed
the title, didn't we? We changed the title to Warmed Hearts. Or was it Warmed Souls? I think.
Have a think. If you'd like to share stories next time, it would be brilliant to hear from you.